My name is Florence Hale, 10 years. That's how long I've been here. Through system crashes, company rebrands, budget freezes, and record-setting growth quarters. 10 years of early arrivals and last-minute saves, of plans B through Z. I've given Aurelia Holdings my time, my energy, and, more than once, my entire weekend. And you know what? I loved it. Still do, most days. And I'm the director of strategic operations. What that really means is, if there's a fire, I put it out. If there's confusion, I clarify. If there's a deadline, I hit it. I manage people, systems, crises, and change, often all at once. And I do it well. Not because I have to, but because I care. This company matters to me. I grew here. I became someone here. And now, there's a vacancy at the top. The Vice President of Operations announced his departure last month, and the official internal elections are just around the corner. Unlike most companies, ours actually votes. Senior management chooses based on performance, peer reviews, and strategic vision. It's not just a promotion, it's a statement. And I'm ready. I've already updated my internal portfolio, impact metrics, campaign breakdowns, the glowing peer feedback from 3 departments last quarter. I even included the 2 industry awards I won last year, one for innovation in operational systems, the other for leadership during crisis management. I'm not being arrogant. I know what I've done. I know what I bring to the table. The whispers have already started in the hallway, people speculating, dropping names, making predictions. I try to ignore most of it, but last Thursday, I overheard something in the break room while pouring my second coffee. "They're all strong candidates," someone said, probably one of the newer analysts. "Jeremy, Alex, and Ravi. They've all got executive presence." "All guys," someone else muttered. "Of course." I didn't turn around, just stirred my coffee. It's true. All the confirmed candidates so far are men. All of them talented, yes, but none of them with my depth. None of them who've led a department through 3 restructuring phases. None who can walk into a room, scan a dashboard, and immediately spot the bottleneck. I'm not intimidated. In fact, part of me is excited. The competition sharpens me, reminds me what I've earned. Still, I know how these things go. Sometimes elections aren't about the best choice. They're about the most visible one, the loudest one, the one who plays golf with the board or speaks in confident buzzwords on the executive floor. But I'm not worried, because I've already done the work. I've built the foundation. I've mentored junior staff who now lead their own teams. I've stayed up reworking entire launch plans when client needs changed overnight. I've been the constant. And when the votes are cast, I know what matters most. Outcomes, results, integrity, leadership. So let them speculate, let them circle, let the board take their time. Because when the dust settles and all the names are on the ballot, mine will still be the one they know they can trust. Florence Hale, director, strategist, builder, and soon, if all goes right, vice president. There's a funny thing that happens when you've spent your whole life doing everything right. You start to believe the world will recognize it. The election for vice president was scheduled for the last week of April. It wasn't public, not like politics. But inside Aurelia Holdings, it was as close to a campaign as you could get. Presentations, visibility, peer influence. Performance metrics whispered between departments. Everyone watching, everyone speculating. And I was calm. I didn't campaign. I didn't pull favors. I didn't need to. I had spent 10 years building this place from the inside out, quietly, diligently, without demanding attention. I wasn't the loudest voice in the room, but when things broke, I was the one they called. And I always answered. That's who I was. I had the awards, the numbers, the trust. I was the only department head with 3 consecutive years of budget surplus and the highest staff retention in the company. My last 2 cross-functional projects beat their projected outcomes by 26% and 31%, respectively. Every major launch I'd led had landed clean. No delays, no drama. When I heard the other candidates were Jeremy, Ravi, and Alex, I felt a strange flicker of relief. Not because they weren't good. Jeremy was a solid strategist, Ravi a thoughtful communicator. But none of them had my depth. None had rebuilt a system from scratch or pulled a product line back from collapse with 48 hours and a half-broken server. I had field-tested experience, grit. They had charm. And then there was Alex Marshall, head of sales strategy. Tall, charismatic, the kind of guy who never missed a company social or failed to name-drop a VP at the coffee bar. He was good at people, really good. He had a way of smiling that made you forget what he just promised, and a talent for vanishing when the hard work actually started. Alex was all polish. No roots. I wasn't worried. I believed, genuinely, that people would see through the gloss. That merit would win. I worked through the final week preparing my election presentation. A quiet pitch session with senior leadership. Each candidate was allotted 15 minutes to present a vision for operations over the next 5 years. I mapped mine meticulously. Charts, process audits, a roadmap broken down into quarters with measurable goals. I even ran a staff impact analysis to demonstrate the downstream effects of each proposed change. It was clear, precise, actionable. When I walked into that boardroom, I felt ready. Not nervous, ready. Kingsley, our CEO, sat at the head of the table, flanked by the heads of HR and legal, and 2 board members dialing in via screen. I stood calmly. I made eye contact, and then I walked them through it. My plan was lean, scalable, and people first. I talked about infrastructure. I talked about transparency. I talked about making Aurelia Holdings a company that didn't just hit targets, but built systems that could sustain them. When I finished, the room was quiet, focused. Kingsley nodded, just once, like he was absorbing something bigger than expected. I walked out with my head high. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I didn't ask how the other presentations went. I didn't snoop. I trusted the process. That evening, I sat by the window of my apartment, watching the city lights hum to life. I thought of what it would feel like to finally move into the executive office, to have my name on the glass, my voice in the quarterly vision meetings. It felt close, too close. Friday morning came sharp and warm. The announcement was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the executive lounge. Just the 5 candidates, HR and Kingsley. I wore navy, my favorite blazer, hair tied clean, presentation folder tucked under my arm, even though it was already over. Just habit. We gathered in a quiet semicircle, all of us standing except for Kingsley, who rose slowly from his seat like he was preparing for something ceremonial. I want to thank all of you, he began, his tone practiced but sincere. This company runs on the minds in this room, and choosing just one candidate wasn't easy. I felt my heart flutter, just once. This decision came down to leadership, vision, and more than that, presence. The kind of presence that inspires teams, earns client trust, and sets the tone for our next chapter. A strange chill crawled into my spine. And so, it's my pleasure to announce that the new Vice President of Operations will be Alex Marshall. Silence. I didn't move. I didn't blink. My ears buzzed with a rush of something hot and cold at the same time. For a split second, I was sure I had misheard. But then Alex let out a soft laugh, his signature, charming chuckle, and stepped forward with a handshake ready. Applause broke out. Polite. Muted. No one quite made eye contact. Kingsley said more. Something about forward momentum, public presence, client-facing strength. Words that floated above me like radio static. I turned slightly, just enough to see Alex's grin widen as he accepted the handshake, the congratulations, the small, hollow speech being read aloud in his name. His tie was a little crooked. His pitch had been mostly about culture and energy. I remembered that because I'd sat near the door and heard him open with a story about a networking event. He had no framework, no roadmap, just a smile. When it was over, I stepped forward, extended my hand. "Congratulations," I said. My voice didn't even shake. "Thanks," he said, flashing that grin again. Let's grab lunch sometime. Would love to get your insight. Insight. I nodded, then walked out of the lounge. Out of the room I had built myself to belong in, and into the hallway where for the first time in 10 years, I wasn't sure who this company saw when they looked at me. By Monday morning, the disbelief had crystallized into something colder, sharper, like a shard of glass you don't notice until it's buried in your skin. I didn't tell anyone I was going to speak to Kingsley. I didn't run it by HR or rehearse it with friends. I just knew that if I didn't ask, if I let it slide, I would lose something more important than a promotion. I'd lose my voice. The building was buzzing that morning, with its usual hum of movement and quiet conversations. Everyone was pretending Friday hadn't happened. The ones who had been rooting for me avoided my eyes. The ones who had been silent stayed that way. And Alex, newly minted vice president, was already in the corner office, his name freshly printed on the door plaque like it had always been meant to be there. I wasn't bitter, not yet. I was curious. Or that's what I told myself. The internal email I'd sent on Saturday had been brief, professional, and direct. Subject: request for clarification, VP decision. I would appreciate the opportunity to better understand the selection criteria used for the Vice President of Operations appointment. Please advise on a convenient time for a short meeting. Regards, Florence Hale. HR scheduled it for Monday afternoon, 3:00 p.m. Kingsley's office. 15-minute slot. That's all I'd asked for. At 2:55, I walked to the top floor. I didn't hesitate. Not at the elevator. Not at the receptionist's knowing glance, not even at the polished glass door that read Executive Suite, C. Kingsley. He was waiting. Already seated behind his desk, hands folded, an untouched coffee steaming beside him. "Florence," he said with that measured smile. "Come in." I sat across from him, legs crossed, folder resting lightly in my lap. He didn't offer a handshake. I didn't expect one. "Thank you for meeting with me," I said. "I won't take much of your time." He gave a shallow nod, the kind that's supposed to signal openness, but lands more like dismissal. "Of course." I figured this was about the election. "It is." I met his eyes. "I'd like to understand the basis for the decision to appoint Alex as vice president." Kingsley leaned back slightly. "We had several strong candidates." "I understand," I said. "But if we're evaluating by measurable performance, strategic delivery, and peer leadership, my record exceeds every other finalist's. I have the data. I've also led more successful cross-departmental initiatives than any other department head." "I don't dispute your numbers," he said flatly. "You've been very consistent." That word, consistent, I felt it like a slap in disguise. "I'm not looking for praise," I said carefully. "Just clarity. What did Alex bring that I didn't?" He was silent for a beat. Then he picked up his coffee, didn't drink it, just cradled it in one hand. "Florence, you've been a vital part of this company. But leadership at this level isn't just about competence. It's about optics. It's about perception." He said it like it was a fact, like it should be obvious. "Elaborate?" I asked, though I already knew what he was circling. Kingsley exhaled, slow and deliberate. Then he set the coffee down and looked me square in the eye. "In this company," he said, voice calm and certain, "women will never hold positions higher than men." The room went still. Time didn't stop. It slowed, like the world was waiting to see what I'd do with those words. "I'm sorry?" I said, even though I'd heard him clearly. He didn't flinch. "It's not personal. It's about structure, about what our partners expect. The board believes strongly in maintaining traditional leadership optics. It's what reassures our clients." "Optics," I repeated softly. He nodded. "There's no ill intent here, Florence. It's just how this place has always worked." I stared at him, a man who had smiled through my reviews, shaken my hand after every successful quarter, praised my performance in meetings. And now, with the same face, the same voice, was telling me I'd never rise higher because of what I was, not who I was. "I've done everything right," I said quietly. "Every project, every late night, every crisis, I carried this company through its hardest years." He gave a small, measured shrug. "And we're grateful, but that's not the point." No, it wasn't. The point was never my work. It was never the data, the outcomes, the leadership. It was that I was a woman, that I'd never been a real candidate at all. I stood slowly, pressing my folder tighter to my side. "Thank you for your honesty," I said. "Florence," he said, almost gently, "please don't make this adversarial. Your role is still secure. We still value you." I met his eyes one last time. "No," I said, "you don't." And I left. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. But something inside me, something deep, something that had once believed, broke cleanly in two. That afternoon, I returned to my office, sat at my desk, and stared out over the city like I'd never seen it before. He thought he'd closed a door. What he didn't realize was, he'd just blown it off its hinges. The elevator ride back down to my floor felt longer than usual. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the weight in my chest. Or maybe it was the knowledge that something I had believed in for 10 years had just shattered without making a sound. I stepped out into the hallway like a ghost. Untouched, unseen. Everyone was going about their day. Phones ringing, emails pinging, a few voices laughing around the corner near the coffee bar. I passed them without a word. My office was waiting. Same corner view, same framed certificates, same little sticky note on my monitor that read, "You're stronger than you think." I sat down. My hands hovered over the keyboard, motionless. The cursor blinked steadily on the blank screen, and I watched it like it might tell me what to do, what to say, how to even begin walking away from a place I'd given so much of myself to. I had sacrificed weekends, worked through illnesses, postponed vacations. I had missed birthdays, anniversaries, and countless hours of sleep, not because anyone demanded it, but because I cared. About the work, the people, the future I thought I was building. And now I knew that future had never existed. Not here. Not for someone like me. In this company, women will never hold positions higher than men. The words echoed in my mind, sharp and acidic, like a truth that had been hiding in the walls all along, waiting to step forward when I was finally close enough to touch what I'd earned. I opened a new document, typed one word, resignation. It stared back at me like a challenge, a dare. For a moment, my fingers froze, because even though I knew this was right, even though I could feel the betrayal pulsing under my skin, there was still grief. I was grieving the woman I had been when I walked into Kingsley's office, the one who still believed that hard work and results were enough, that excellence mattered, that merit meant something. I thought of all the nights I had stayed late, the early mornings, where I was the first one in the building, the younger employees who had come to me for guidance, the times I had stepped into chaos and brought it back to order. I wasn't just walking away from a job. I was burying a version of myself. But then, beneath the sadness, I felt something else, a slow-burning certainty. This wasn't the end. It was an evolution. I began typing. To Christopher Kingsley, subject, notice of resignation. Effective immediately, I am resigning from my position as Director of Strategic Operations at Aurelia Holdings. This decision comes after significant reflection on the current leadership culture and the limitations placed on my professional growth. Over the past 10 years, I have contributed to the success of this company in measurable, tangible ways. I have led critical projects, improved systems, trained staff, and exceeded performance expectations across every metric. However, it has become clear that advancement within this organization is not based on merit, performance, or leadership ability, but on optics, favoritism, and antiquated hierarchies that no longer reflect the reality of the modern workforce. I do not wish to be a part of a structure that refuses to recognize the value of its most qualified leaders, simply because they do not fit a certain mold. I leave with my head held high, knowing I gave this place everything. And I take with me what cannot be dismissed: my knowledge, my relationships, and my ability to build again. Sincerely, Florence Hale. I read it twice. Not to double-check, to absorb it. Then, without hesitation, I hit send. The email vanished from my outbox like a whisper carried away on wind. And just like that, it was done. I sat back in my chair. The room felt eerily quiet. The city skyline glowed faintly through the window, and for the first time in years, I looked at it without a schedule pressing down on my shoulders. There was no panic, only a strange, fierce calm. Because I knew something Kingsley didn't. I wasn't walking away in defeat. I was stepping out of something toxic. I wasn't leaving because I couldn't hack it. I was leaving because I refused to keep watering a garden where nothing would grow. He thought he had silenced me with tradition, that I would stay and settle, that I'd be so grateful for my secure role, that I'd accept the ceiling above my head. But he was wrong. I was done asking for permission. He would regret his words. Not today. Maybe not tomorrow, but soon. When the gears stopped turning, when the cracks started to show, when they realized that the woman who kept everything running had walked out with nothing but her name and her power intact. And when they do, it won't be anger they feel. It'll be fear. Because I wasn't just the best person for that role. I was the one holding it all together. And now I was free to build something they couldn't control. It had been exactly 2 hours and 15 minutes since I sent the resignation email. I was still at my desk, finishing a few final notes for my team. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. They deserved closure, clarity. They'd done the hard work with me, followed me through impossible timelines and impossible decisions. They didn't deserve to be left in the dark. The office outside was thinning. Late afternoon haze filtered in through the windows, and most of the floor had quieted into keyboard taps and the low buzz of air conditioning. Then, a chime. Meeting request. Christopher Kingsley. Time, 4:45 p.m. Duration, 15 minutes. Subject, brief chat. I stared at it. My hand hovered over the decline button. I had no obligation to entertain whatever parting script he wanted to deliver. But something in me clicked. The part that wanted him to see me walk out with my head high. To see, for himself, what it looked like when someone he'd tried to diminish refused to bend. I accepted. At 4:42, I made my way upstairs. The executive floor always had this artificial hush, like the carpets themselves swallowed sound. Kingsley's assistant looked up as I passed, but didn't say anything. She knew. I knocked once on his door. No answer. I walked in. He was behind his desk, jacket off, sleeves rolled, a crystal tumbler in his hand. Probably bourbon, knowing him. He stood when he saw me, like this was some casual debrief. His smile had a strange edge to it, like he'd been waiting for this moment. "Florence," he said, gesturing to the seat across from him. "Thanks for coming." I didn't sit. "I won't take much of your time," I said, voice steady. "I assumed you wanted to speak before I left." He raised his glass slightly. "Figured it was the least we could do. 10 years, after all." I said nothing, let the silence hang. He leaned against the edge of the desk. "You caught me by surprise. I thought you might be upset, sure. But I didn't think you'd walk." "I didn't think I'd need to," I said, "until you made it clear I was never going to be considered, no matter what I delivered." He gave a soft laugh. "You're good, Florence. No one's denying that. But VP? You really thought that was your next step?" "I didn't think it. I earned it." "Earned it?" he echoed, voice lifting just slightly. "Let me ask you something. Do you think someone else out there is just waiting to make you a VP? That there's some company desperate for a quiet operations manager with a chip on her shoulder?" There it was. The real Kingsley. The one who smiled in meetings, praised results when convenient, but always made sure I stayed in my place. The man who had built a career out of being just powerful enough to decide who succeeded and who didn't. "You've done well here," he continued, pacing slowly. "But without this name on your resume? Without me as your reference? You really think someone's going to hand you a leadership role?" "I don't need your name," I said quietly. He smirked. "Of course you do. You've worked here your whole career. You think those awards matter without context? You think companies care about strategy charts? They want someone they can see, someone who looks the part." I stared at him. He took a sip of his drink and shook his head. "Look, maybe you land somewhere, mid-level, project lead maybe. But Florence, without me? Without this company? You're just another paper resume in a stack." That's when it hit me. He wasn't trying to warn me. He was trying to erase me, to convince me I didn't exist outside of the walls he'd built. I took a step forward, not angry, clear. "You know what your biggest mistake was?" I asked. "Thinking I needed you." He blinked. "You think you're the reason I've succeeded? You were never in the room when I saved this company money, when I salvaged failed launches, when I cleaned up other people's messes. You smiled at the results and took the credit, but you never saw the work." "Florence." "I don't want your validation," I said, cutting him off. "I want you to remember this moment. Because months from now, when things start to slide and you can't figure out why, when the systems break down and no one knows how to fix them, this is the moment it started." He stared at me. "You didn't just lose a manager," I said. "You lost your backbone." I turned, walked to the door, paused. He still hadn't moved. "You'll regret this," I added, not as a threat, as a truth. And then I left. I woke up the morning after my resignation with a strange stillness inside me. Not regret, not fear, just silence. The kind that comes after something final, when the noise and weight of everything you've been carrying is suddenly gone. It was 6:37 a.m. No alarms, no Slack pings, no mental to-do list crowding my head before my feet even hit the floor. I made coffee and stood barefoot in the kitchen, watching the steam curl through the air like smoke from a bridge I'd just burned. Only I didn't feel scorched. I felt clear. By 8 a.m., I had my laptop open, an old leather notebook beside it. Not the corporate kind with a logo on the cover. The one I kept in my drawer, filled with late-night ideas and what-ifs I never said out loud. Flipping through it, I landed on a page I barely remembered writing. Dated 2 years ago. Scribbled in slanted handwriting. "Start something of your own. Florence Hale Consulting. Hale Systems. Don't wait for permission." I stared at the words like they belonged to someone else. Some version of me who had dared to hope, even back then. And I smiled. The first real smile I'd felt in days. By mid-morning, I was sketching business names on the margin. Logo ideas. Taglines. None of it was final, but it didn't need to be. What mattered was the movement. I wasn't stuck. I was building. At 11:12 a.m., I sent the email. 2. Dana Kapoor, subject. Catching up. "Hey Dana, I hope you're well. I've officially stepped away from Aurelia and am starting something new. You once mentioned wanting to work together. If that offer still stands, I'd love to talk. Best, Florence." She replied in under 10 minutes. Subject. "I was hoping this day would come, Florence. Yes! I've been quietly waiting for this email. Let's talk tomorrow." We scheduled a call for the next morning. Dana and I had met at an industry roundtable 3 years ago. She was sharp, bold, with a mind that moved like a chess player 10 steps ahead. We'd collaborated briefly when her company, Calyx Core, needed crisis intervention on a vendor collapse. I had stepped in, untangled the mess, and rebuilt the delivery chain within 2 weeks. After that, she always made a point to stay in touch. Our call lasted 47 minutes. Most of it was her laying out exactly how much she needed someone like me. "We're restructuring product ops," Dana said. "I need systems, structure, someone who can handle a dozen moving parts without blinking. That's you." "I haven't even incorporated yet," I admitted. "Good," she replied. "That means you'll build it exactly the way you want." We drafted a flexible contract, Short-term to start, with room to grow. It wasn't just work, it was trust. And it was mine. That afternoon, I registered my business, Hale Systems Consulting, LLC. Typing my name into the state business portal, watching it appear in official black and white, felt surreal. No longer buried beneath someone else's hierarchy. No longer a line item in a chain of command. This was mine. I bought a domain. Created a landing page. Basic. Clean. Just my name, my experience, and a line that read, "Transforming operations from the inside out." I set up my home office with the discipline I'd once used to build quarterly timelines. Whiteboard, new monitor, a quiet corner near the window where sunlight spilled across my desk. And then the emails started coming. One from a client I'd worked with during a particularly complicated multi-region rollout. "I heard you left. Please tell me you're available. We've hit a snag, and I can't imagine anyone else fixing this." Another from an old contact in finance ops. "Our team's still quoting your last systems playbook. Any chance you'd be open to consulting with us independently?" Word had spread faster than I expected. They didn't just remember me. They missed me. Because I wasn't just a name buried in an org chart. I was the solution they trusted when everything got hard. Each message felt like a crack forming in the wall Kingsley had tried to build around me. "You're just another resume. No one's going to hand you a leadership role. You're nothing without this company." He'd believed that, but the clients didn't. They were choosing me, not Aurelia, not the logo, me. For the first time in my career, I didn't feel like I was holding a title. I felt like I was becoming something. And this wasn't a step backward. It was the beginning of something bigger than anything I'd ever imagined. I never announced my departure publicly. There was no carefully worded LinkedIn post, no social media rebrand, no loud "I've launched my business" proclamation with sparkly emojis and hashtags. Instead, I did what I always did. I moved quietly, with intention, with focus. I reached out only to a few people, not to pitch, not to ask for favors, just to check in. The first email I sent was to Natalie Raymond, a senior implementation lead from a major logistics firm we'd partnered with last year. She had been detail-oriented, fierce, and, unlike most corporate partners, genuinely appreciative of my work. I remembered the handwritten thank you note she'd mailed after we rescued her system migration. Subject: "Just saying hello, hey Natalie. Hope you're doing well. I wanted to share that I've stepped away from Aurelia and am working on some independent ventures. No agenda here, just wanted to say it was a pleasure working with you, and thank you for always being a true professional. Wishing you a smooth Q2. Warmly, Florence." Her reply came fast. Subject: "Whoa, Florence, what? Honestly, I'm not surprised. Since you've been gone, things feel scattered. I actually asked about you on our last check-in. I got a weird canned response. Listen, if you're consulting now, we should talk. Our current project is already behind, and frankly, we could really use your brain in the room again." I read it twice, then 3 more times. Not because I was shocked, but because the weight of it didn't fully register all at once. They noticed. They felt the gap. That same day, I had 2 other messages in my inbox, both from past clients. One asked if I was available for a quick side consult. The other wanted to pick my brain about a failed implementation that was quietly being called a disaster. And I hadn't reached out to either of them. They'd found me. No company letterhead, no brand, just me. By the end of that week, I had a wait list. I was stunned. But not because I didn't believe in myself. I was stunned because they did. For years, I'd been told, subtly, consistently, that the value I brought was part of a collective, that my successes were only possible because of the infrastructure around me. But now, stripped of that infrastructure, I wasn't crumbling. I was thriving. The real surprise came when the colleagues started calling. Not all at once. Not dramatically, but steadily. First was Anya from the product team. We'd worked together on a disastrous automation rollout 3 years ago and built a sort of bond through shared overtime and chaos. "Florence," she whispered on the call, I didn't say anything when you left, but I knew it was coming. I just didn't expect you to look this free. She laughed nervously. I mean it in the best way. You look like someone who got out. That word, got out, stuck with me. The next call was Jeremy, a data analyst from finance. He'd never said much during our years together. But now? I've been watching your site, he said, almost shyly. You've built something real. And the fact that clients are reaching out to you, not the company, that says everything. Then it was Thomas. Then Eliza. Then 3 more names I hadn't spoken to since they quietly left Aurelia over the past year. They all said the same thing, in their own way. We see you, we get it. And maybe, we want in. I hadn't intended to build a movement. I had just wanted a life where I didn't have to ask permission to lead. But the world around me was shifting. Because when someone who's been pushed down quietly rises, it sends a message. That it's possible, that you're not trapped, that you're not crazy for wanting more. And slowly, people were coming out of the shadows. Some called it brave, others called it smart. But I wasn't trying to be either. I was just done playing by rules that were never written for people like me. At Aurelia, things were unraveling. I didn't hear it directly, but I saw it in the desperate LinkedIn posts from my old team. In the vague language about exciting new restructuring plans. In the flood of anonymous Glassdoor reviews that suddenly started pouring in. Too detailed, too timely to be a coincidence. They had lost more than a director. They'd lost a cornerstone, and now they were realizing it. I didn't take pleasure in it, but I wasn't going to apologize either. Kingsley had once told me, without me, you're nothing. And yet, here I was. Standing, growing, in demand. Clients didn't care that I wasn't wearing Aurelia's badge. They cared that I delivered, that I listened, that I told the truth, even when it was uncomfortable, and that I had never treated their business like a stepping stone. They remembered. And they were choosing me. I didn't plan for a revolution. But sometimes all it takes is one person walking away for others to realize the door was never locked. It began with a whisper, a late-night email from Tina. The subject line was simple. Florence, I'm ready. I've stayed quiet. I watched. I waited. And then I saw you walk out of that building like you weren't afraid. You don't know how long I've been trying to find that kind of courage. You said once that no one's coming to save us, that if we want change, we have to become the change. I didn't fully understand what you meant until you left. I'm ready to leave too. I want in. Wherever you're going, even if it's just a folding chair in a living room. Count me in. Tina. I stared at the screen for several minutes. Tina had been with Aurelia as long as I had. A quiet powerhouse. Brilliant in the ways no one bothered to notice. Until something broke, and she was the only one who could fix it. She had trained half the team that now sat in middle management, and yet, when she applied for a director role, she'd been told, you don't really command the room. What they meant was, she didn't play politics. I called her the next day. No script, no plan, just, come over. She did. With a tote bag full of ideas and a spark in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. She was the first. Then came Amina. She called me the following week, her voice shaking. Amina, who had uncovered a 7-figure loss in our third quarter, only to be told by Kingsley that it would reflect better if the recovery came from someone on the finance team. So she handed her findings to someone else and watched him get credit in the next board presentation. I didn't say anything, she told me. I stayed quiet. I thought I was playing the long game. But you know what? I'm tired of playing. She paused. I want to build something that doesn't require me to be silent in order to succeed. I want in. If there's room. There's always room, I told her. And meant it. By the end of that week, Amina had submitted her resignation. 2 days later, it was Sarah. Sarah had built our internal communication platform from scratch, then watched a male colleague present a watered-down version of her work in a team showcase, while she stood at the back of the room, uncredited. I stayed because I thought eventually they'd see me, she told me. But I've realized some people don't want to see you. especially not when you make them uncomfortable by being better than them. Then, Holly, our operations lead. I wasn't planning to quit, she admitted over coffee. I was going to ride it out until I got my promotion. I raised an eyebrow. Did you get it? She snorted. They gave it to someone who quoted my playbook back to me, said he simplified the language. Apparently, being precise is too intimidating for the board. She put her coffee down. Florence, I don't want to just work for you. I want to build with you. This thing you're creating, it's not a business, it's a correction. And just like that, we became four. Not applicants, not employees. Co-founders of something we didn't even have a name for yet. We started at my dining table, moved to the floor when we ran out of space. I cleared out my guest room and turned it into a war room. Whiteboards, sticky notes, 3 laptops, and a tangle of chargers. We shared snacks, fought over Google Docs, took turns writing copy and reviewing client decks. We laughed more than I remembered being allowed to at Aurelia. And we worked. Oh, we worked. Because the difference now? Everything we did had purpose, power, ownership. And we weren't alone anymore. Other messages started coming in. Not just from clients. From women. Some still at Aurelia. Others from competitors, freelancers, new grads. Women at all stages of their careers whispering the same thing. I saw what you did. I thought I was alone. You give me hope. Some didn't want to quit. Some couldn't. But they were watching. And they were rooting for us. Because what we had sparked wasn't just professional rebellion. It was emotional reparation. It was the sound of women, exhausted from carrying twice the weight for half the recognition, realizing they didn't have to carry it alone anymore. Kingsley had once said, "Without me, you're nobody." And now, the very people he had refused to promote were walking away from him. Not out of anger, out of clarity. He had built a system that kept people small, and I was building one that reminded them how big they truly were. I didn't need to destroy Aurelia. They were doing that themselves. What I needed to do, what I wanted to do, was build a space where potential wasn't feared, where power was shared, where women could breathe. We weren't a company, not yet. We were something older, something stronger, a movement. And it was only just beginning. They say when a ship starts sinking, the last people to admit it are the ones at the helm. That was Kingsley, still smiling in corporate headshots, still tossing around buzzwords like agile pivoting and post-reorg optimization, still pretending not to notice that the floor was rotting beneath him. But the rest of the world? They noticed. The first real hit came 2 months after I left. A short but pointed article on an industry site. Major client pulls contract from Aurelia Holdings citing loss of confidence in leadership. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't trend. But I felt it. That client had been mine. I'd nurtured their project from draft to delivery. I knew their weak spots, their culture, their pain points. And when I walked, I didn't take them with me. I just left. But they followed. Quietly. Because clients don't always need convincing. Sometimes they just need someone to show them where the exits are. 3 days later, another update surfaced. Aurelia announces sudden leadership shakeup, quietly lets go of 2 senior directors. The article danced around the truth, of course. Redirection of strategy. Internal realignment. What they meant was chaos. The people they'd chosen to replace me and the women who left with me weren't working out. The systems we'd built weren't being maintained. There were gaps, critical ones, and they couldn't figure out how to fill them. Because they had always assumed we were replaceable. That process could substitute presence. That anyone could do what we did. They were wrong. Inside Hale Systems, we didn't celebrate. We didn't gloat. We were too busy, too focused. We had real work to do, clients to serve, systems to rebuild, businesses to rescue. And every new client brought the same whisper. We came because we heard what you're doing is different. They didn't mean software. They meant leadership. They meant integrity. They meant us. And while Aurelia fumbled through their PR damage control, we were growing, organically, quietly, powerfully. We weren't hunting contracts, they were coming to us. Because when people saw what we were creating, an environment where ideas weren't hoarded, where success wasn't filtered through ego, they wanted in. Especially women. Especially those who had been told they were difficult when they were just honest, too intense when they were just passionate, not quite ready when they were already leading. And while we built, Aurelia crumbled. Kingsley didn't notice at first. Too insulated, too proud. His circle was filled with yes men and diluted data. But as the articles kept appearing, little fissures in his carefully curated world, his attention shifted. The resignations weren't slowing. In fact, they were accelerating. More women. Not just from my team. From across departments. From finance, HR, product, legal. They were leaving mid-project, mid-quarter, mid-conversation, and no one could figure out why. He held emergency meetings. He hired external consultants to perform morale audits. He launched an empowerment task force with 3 meaningless initiatives and a poster campaign no one paid attention to. Still, they left. Until one afternoon, desperate for answers, he did what he hadn't done since the day I walked out. He typed my name into LinkedIn. He wasn't prepared for what he saw. There I was. Smiling, confident. Not just running a consulting firm, but leading a movement. Under the profile photo, my headline read, Florence Hale, Nehru, founder, Hale Systems. Building equitable structures from the inside out, he scrolled through the updates. A photo of our team in a planning session, sleeves rolled, hands moving across whiteboards. A post announcing our newest contract with a multinational client he had tried to land for years. A video clip from a panel where I was introduced as one of the most quietly influential women reshaping tech infrastructure in 2025. And then, at the bottom of the feed, the final nail. A post with a simple image. 4 women, Tina, Amina, Sarah, Holly, standing beside me on a rooftop at sunset. No caption. Just a hashtag. Not just leaving. We're building, he stared at it. I imagine the silence in his office must have been deafening, because for the first time, he saw the truth. He hadn't lost a director. He had lost his future. The women who had once propped up his success were gone. And now, they were setting the standard. It came in quietly, almost timidly. Not through a formal proposal. Not through one of his assistants, but through a direct email sent late at night. Subject: Possibility of collaboration. Florence, congratulations on your recent success. I've been keeping an eye on Hale Systems, and I must say, I'm impressed with the rapid growth and the caliber of your partnerships. I believe there's significant synergy potential between our 2 firms. I'd welcome a conversation, if you're open to it. I think it could be mutually beneficial. Christopher Kingsley, CEO, Aurelia Holdings. I stared at it for a long time. Then I laughed. Out loud. Alone in my apartment. Synergy potential? This was the man who once told me, in a room full of men who nodded along, that a woman will never hold a position higher than a man in this company. And now he wanted to talk about collaboration. He had watched his kingdom crumble from the inside out, slowly at first, then all at once. Clients dropping, team morale disintegrating, reputation bleeding. He'd tried everything, exit interviews, morale surveys, an all-hands pep talk where he had the nerve to say, "We're still a family." The problem was, families don't chain you to the basement and call it mentorship. And now, desperate to salvage what little control he had left, he was reaching out. To me. I replied, one line, "I'm open to a meeting. You can choose the place." He chose a boutique hotel in Midtown, somewhere glossy, expensive, quietly tucked between marble columns and understated jazz. I arrived early, not because I was eager, but because I wanted him to feel like he'd stepped into my time. He arrived in a tailored suit, tan from some ill-timed executive retreat, and offered me a smile meant to disarm. I didn't smile back. We sat. He waved off the waiter and folded his hands. "I appreciate you coming, Florence," he began. I said nothing. He cleared his throat. "Let me be blunt. We're restructuring. We've hit some turbulence, as you've probably heard, and frankly, I see a path forward that benefits both of us." I raised an eyebrow. He leaned forward, voice hushed, conspiratorial. "We want to bring Hale Systems under the Aurelia umbrella. Not an acquisition, more of a merger. Strategic partnership. You'd retain your leadership, of course. Full creative control. We'd even adjust equity structure to reflect your contributions." He paused, waiting for my reaction. I gave him nothing. "Florence," he added, "this is your opportunity to come back. Not as a manager, but as a partner. Something real, something permanent." There it was. The olive branch from a man who had once used every ounce of power to keep me down. He thought he was being generous. He thought this was the reward I'd been waiting for. He didn't understand. I wasn't coming back. I hadn't built Hale Systems to prove a point. I built it because I finally saw who I was, without the weight of his ceilings over me. And I liked who I saw. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully. His shoulders eased. He was preparing for a negotiation. "But no." He froze. "No?" he echoed, blinking. "No," I repeated. "I'm not interested in a partnership. I'm certainly not interested in folding Hale Systems back into the institution that once told me I was only valuable as long as I stayed in my lane." His mouth opened, but I didn't give him the chance to speak. "I built this from scratch," I continued. "Every client we've landed, every system we've restructured, every woman who's joined our team, none of it needed your name behind it." "You're doing good work," he said quickly, with a smile that tried too hard. "But imagine what you could do with more backing. More." "I already have backing," I said. "From people who believe in me, from women who saw what I did and said, 'Me too.' I don't need a bigger table, Kingsley. I built my own." He leaned back, exhaling slowly. "I misjudged you," he admitted. "No," I said, standing. "You dismissed me. That's different." I gathered my bag, calm and steady. "You wanted me quiet, useful, contained. And now that the silence is costing you millions, you want me loud, but on your terms." He didn't respond. And he didn't need to. Because for the first time in his life, he had to reckon with a truth no PR team could polish. He wasn't offering salvation. He was begging for relevance. I paused at the door, just long enough to say what I'd been holding. "You didn't break me, Christopher. You revealed me." And then I left. Outside, the wind picked up. I pulled my coat tighter and looked up at the city skyline, at the hundreds of buildings that once felt like fortresses I could never enter. Now, they just looked like structures. And I knew I could build higher. In the end, Aurelia didn't implode. It eroded, like cliffs eaten slowly by salt and time. The headlines stopped. The drama faded. But inside the once proud tower on 8th and Wallace, the silence was louder than ever. After Florence turned down Kingsley's last desperate offer, word spread. Not because she announced it, but because people noticed. The clients, the vendors, the rising leaders in tech, they all paid attention. They watched a man try to buy back the dignity he'd never respected, and a woman quietly refused to be bought. The ripple became a current. The exodus continued. Not just women, but men too. People who were tired of politics disguised as meritocracy. People who had seen what Florence built and realized they no longer wanted to work under ceilings, especially the glass kind, painted over with strategic silence. Within a year, Aurelia's revenue dropped 27%. By the second year, 3 of their largest contracts had quietly expired and weren't renewed. Recruiters stopped sending their best candidates. Their reputation, once solid, if not stellar, grew tarnished, then ghosted. It wasn't dramatic. It was a slow refusal. Calls unanswered. Emails politely declined. A gradual shift where people stopped asking, "Can you help us?" and started asking, "Is this another Aurelia?" They launched initiative after initiative. Rebrandings, leadership summits, mentorship programs with performative hashtags and polished brochures. But it was too late. Because culture isn't something you declare, it's something you earn. And theirs had already spoken for itself. Kingsley resigned 2 years later. The announcement was buried at the bottom of a company-wide memo, hidden beneath fluff about strategic growth and organizational evolution. There was no public goodbye, no tribute. He slipped away the same way he'd led, pretending the silence was strength. As for Florence, she never stopped building. Hale Systems didn't become the biggest firm in the city. That had never been her goal. It became the most trusted. Clients knew that when they came to her, they'd be heard. Not just nodded at. Heard. Her company didn't operate like a hierarchy. It moved like a coalition. Flat, collaborative, sharp. Decisions were made by those closest to the work. Promotions weren't begged for. They were recognized. Her old apartment had been replaced by a warm loft space downtown, sunlight pouring through tall windows, filled with laughter, laptops, whiteboards, and always women who'd once felt invisible elsewhere. She mentored fiercely, not the performative kind, but the deep, disruptive kind. The kind that taught young women how to walk into rooms without shrinking, how to negotiate without apologizing, how to leave when a place tries to make them choose between excellence and dignity. She spoke on panels, not about gender alone, but about standards, systems, sustainability. She taught companies how to stop bleeding talent and start earning loyalty. She turned down offers to be bought out more times than she could count. She didn't want to scale for the sake of headlines. She wanted to stay honest, and she did. Most days, she worked from the new office. Some days, she worked from her lake house, barefoot on the porch, coffee in hand. On clear mornings, she journaled, not for content, not for the brand, just for herself. And every so often, she read the emails from women across the country, some who had quit toxic jobs, others who had finally asked for the raise, some still stuck, but hopeful, because they had seen Florence's name on a headline and thought, if she can walk, maybe I can too. The morale of the story? It was never about proving Kingsley wrong. It was about proving herself right. Florence didn't rise because she was angry. She rose because she knew her worth before the world was ready to agree. And when she left, she didn't just start over, she started something new. A way of working that didn't demand compromise. A world where ambition wasn't a liability, where leadership didn't require silence, and where every woman who walked through her doors knew, this is your table now. You don't need to be invited, you built it.